In the beginning, love felt like everything. It filled the small apartment with laughter, hope, and promises whispered in the dark. Ifeoma believed love could conquer hunger, struggle, and uncertainty. Her husband, Chinedu, held her hands and spoke of a future that felt close enough to touch. They had little money but endless belief. When problems came, they laughed them away. When nights were hard, they reminded each other that love was enough. Ifeoma ignored the quiet warning signs because love felt powerful. She trusted feelings more than reality. Back then, she didn't know that love could be sincere and still insufficient. Some lessons only reveal themselves after sacrifice has been exhausted. Ifeoma sacrificed easily. She reduced her needs so Chinedu's dreams could breathe. She skipped meals when money ran short and smiled through exhaustion. When he lost his job, she reassured him. When rejection followed rejection, she prayed harder. She believed supporting him was her role as a wife. Chinedu noticed her sacrifices, but he didn't fully feel them. To him, they were temporary inconveniences, not permanent costs. Love blinded both of them differently. Ifeoma thought sacrifice would strengthen the marriage. Chinedu thought success would eventually fix everything. Neither realized that unbalanced sacrifice slowly builds resentment even when wrapped in love. As time passed, Chinedu's dreams grew louder. His ambitions filled conversations. He spoke of success, respect, and recognition. Ifeoma listened faithfully, even when her own dreams shrank quietly. She adjusted her life around his goals. Her plans were postponed, her ambitions delayed. She told herself it was temporary, but postponement has a way of becoming permanent when no one is watching. Chinedu didn't stop loving her, but he stopped noticing her sacrifices. His focus turned outward, while hers remained rooted in survival. Love was still present. Balance was not. Money changed the atmosphere before it changed their lifestyle. Chinedu's breakthrough came suddenly: a deal, a connection, a door finally opening. Relief replaced anxiety. Pride replaced humility. Ifeoma celebrated him sincerely. She thanked God and believed their struggles were finally behind them. But money brought confidence that didn't know how to share space. Chinedu's voice grew firmer. His patience thinned. He still said he loved her, but his tone carried less warmth. Ifeoma noticed the shift but ignored it. She believed adjustment was normal. What she didn't realize was that money had entered the marriage without invitation, and it was already rearranging priorities. Ifeoma tried to speak, not to complain, but to connect. She shared her exhaustion, her loneliness, her quiet fears. Chinedu listened briefly, then dismissed them gently. "You worry too much," he said. "Things are better now." But better for him didn't feel better for her. Love remained, but listening disappeared. Conversations became one-sided. Decisions were made without her input. She learned to keep her thoughts inside. Love without listening feels like presence without partnership. And slowly, Ifeoma began to feel alone in a marriage that still looked complete from the outside. In public, Chinedu praised his wife. People admired their relationship. They called her lucky. Ifeoma smiled politely, hiding the distance that lived between them. At home, conversations were short. Affection was rare. Attention was selective. She noticed how easily he listened to others while struggling to hear her. How quickly he offered patience outside but withheld it inside. This contradiction confused her. She wondered if love was meant to feel like this: present but distant, visible but hollow. And for the first time, she questioned a painful possibility. Maybe love alone could not sustain a marriage when respect and consideration were missing. The words came unexpectedly. Sharp, casual, careless. "You should be grateful," Chinedu said during an argument. Grateful. The words struck deeper than shouting ever could. It dismissed her sacrifices and reduced her pain to ingratitude. Ifeoma fell silent. She realized something had shifted permanently. Love no longer protected her from disrespect. That night she cried quietly, not from anger but disappointment. Some wounds don't bleed, they settle. And once they settle, they change how you see everything that follows. Ifeoma spoke less after that. Silence became her shield. She stopped explaining herself, stopped defending her feelings, stopped expecting understanding. Chinedu mistook her silence for peace. He didn't realize it was withdrawal. Love was still there, but it was tired. Silence protected her heart, but it also created distance she didn't know how to close. And distance, once established, rarely shrinks on its own. People admired Ifeoma's marriage. They envied her lifestyle. Compliments followed her everywhere. But admiration felt like a prison. It forced her to maintain an image she no longer lived. She couldn't complain, couldn't explain, couldn't confess that love had become lonely. Gratitude was expected, silence was encouraged, and so she carried her pain quietly. Some marriages don't break loudly. They erode slowly under expectations and appearances. Despite everything, Ifeoma hoped. She believed things could change. She prayed, adjusted, waited. Hope kept her trying long after exhaustion set in. But hope without effort from both sides becomes self-betrayal. And slowly, she began to sense that she was the only one still fighting for reality arrived quietly. Not through betrayal or scandal, but neglect. Chinedu was present, but unavailable. He provided, but disconnected. Love remained, but partnership disappeared. And Ifeoma finally understood something painful. Love is not the same as commitment. You can love someone and still fail them daily. That realization hurt more than anger ever could. Late one night, Ifeoma asked herself a question she had avoided for years. What happens when love is not enough? The answer frightened her, because the truth meant she had choices to make. Awareness changed everything. Ifeoma began observing instead of excusing, listening instead of hoping. She wasn't angry, she was awake. And awakening changes how you endure pain. She didn't leave, she didn't fight. She prepared quietly. Growth began silently. Love was still there, but it no longer protected her dignity. And that realization marked the beginning of a choice that would change everything. Ifeoma didn't wake up one day and decide to pull away. The distance grew quietly, almost politely. She still cooked, still smiled, still asked about his day. But something inside her had stepped back. She stopped waiting for warmth that never came, stopped expecting apologies that were never offered. Her heart learned restraint the way her body once learned sacrifice. Chinedu noticed changes but misread them. He thought she was finally content. He thought silence meant peace. He didn't understand that withdrawal is not calm, it is preparation. And preparation, once complete, changes outcomes permanently. Chinedu's success grew steadily. Meetings replaced evenings. Travel replaced conversation. He believed providing was proof of love. Bills were paid on time. Gifts arrived occasionally. Comfort increased. But intimacy declined. Ifeoma noticed how money spoke louder than effort in their marriage. Whenever she raised emotional concerns, he reminded her of everything he had done financially. Love became a transaction, and she realized something painful. Being taken care of is not the same as being considered. That night she slept beside him, feeling further away than ever before. Chinedu began comparing without noticing the damage. Other women understand this, he said casually. They don't complain this much. Each comparison chipped away at Ifeoma's confidence. She wondered when partnership became competition, when love turned into evaluation. She didn't argue, she absorbed, but comparisons have a way of planting questions, and those questions grow quietly. Ifeoma asked herself if she was still valued or merely tolerated. That night, she stood before the mirror longer than usual, wondering when she began shrinking herself to fit into a space she once helped build. A friend noticed the change before Chinedu did. "You don't sound like yourself anymore," she said gently. Ifeoma smiled and brushed it off, but the words lingered. Sometimes it takes an outsider to reflect what you've normalized. For the first time, Ifeoma spoke honestly, carefully, cautiously. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't accuse. She simply described how alone love had become. Her friend listened without judgment. That conversation did something important. It reminded Ifeoma that her feelings were valid, and validation is dangerous when you've been surviving on silence. The night Chinedu didn't come home, no explanation followed. His phone was off. Messages unread. Ifeoma waited quietly, fighting the urge to panic. When morning came, relief mixed with something darker clarity. He arrived casually, unconcerned by her worry. No apology, no explanation. That moment broke something final, not trust, expectation. She realized that love without accountability invites neglect. And neglect, when repeated, becomes permission. That day, she stopped asking questions she knew would never be. The argument wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Chinedu dismissed her feelings with a wave of his hand. "You're overreacting," he said. That sentence did more damage than shouting ever could. It told her that her emotions were inconvenient, that her experience didn't matter. Respect left the room quietly that day. And once respect leaves, love struggles to survive. Ifeoma felt it clearly. The marriage had crossed a line it couldn't easily return from. This silence was different. It wasn't fear-based. It wasn't confusion. It was intentional. Ifeoma stopped explaining herself. She redirected her energy inward. Reading, learning, planning. Chinedu enjoyed the peace. He didn't realize the silence was strategic. There are silences that beg for attention, and silences that prepare exits. This one belonged to the latter. Ifeoma began saving money quietly, not large amounts, just enough to remind herself she had options. She updated skills she once abandoned, reconnected with dreams she postponed. Self-preservation replaced endurance. She wasn't leaving yet, but she was no longer trapped, and knowing you can leave changes how you stay. In public, Chinedu continued praising his wife. "She's strong," he told people. "She understands me." Ifeoma smiled politely, knowing the truth lived elsewhere. That contrast exhausted her. She realized the world loved the idea of her marriage, not the reality of it. And she was tired of performing stability while breaking internally. One question followed her everywhere. If nothing changes, can I live like this forever? The answer came easily. No. And with that answer came grief. Not for the marriage she had, but the one she hoped for. Chinedu noticed the change too late. She no longer reacted, no longer pleaded, no longer tried. He asked what was wrong. She answered honestly. And for the first time, he felt threatened not by anger, but detachment. Detachment scares people who are used to control. Chinedu promised to change. Words came easily. Effort did not. Ifeoma listened quietly. She had learned to judge by patterns, not promises. Hope finally released its grip. Waiting ended. Ifeoma chose clarity over patience. Love remained, but it stood alone, without respect, without partnership, without effort. And love, standing alone, cannot carry a marriage. The decision wasn't announced. It settled quietly in her heart. And once settled, it couldn't be undone. Ifeoma did not leave with shouting or tears. She packed quietly while Chinedu was away. Only essentials. Only dignity. She looked around the house one last time, not with hatred, but clarity. This place held memories, not safety. A short note waited on the table. Not an accusation, not a plea, just truth. I loved you, but love was not enough. When the door closed behind her, Fear tried to follow. She didn't let it. Leaving did not feel like victory. It felt like survival. Some endings are not dramatic. They are necessary. Chinedu returned home expecting routine. Instead, he met silence. No food, no greeting, no presence. At first, he assumed she would return. She always did. But hours passed, then days. The silence grew heavier. For the first time, he felt what she had lived with for years. Absence. And absence is loud when you finally notice it. Regret didn't arrive immediately. Pride delayed it. Chinedu blamed stress, work, misunderstanding, anything but himself. Then nights became unbearable. He replayed conversations, her silence, her patience, her warnings he ignored. Regret finally settled heavy and unmoving. Not because she left, but because she had stayed so long without being seen. That truth hurt deeply. Ifeoma rebuilt slowly. A small place. A simple routine. Peace she had forgotten existed. She rediscovered herself outside marriage. Outside endurance. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was steady. And for the first time in years, she slept deeply. Chinedu tried to fix things the only way he knew: money. Gifts, transfers, promises wrapped in comfort. But peace cannot be bought, and dignity does not return through transactions. He finally understood what he lost wasn't love. It was access. His apology was sincere. But sincerity doesn't rewind time. Ifeoma listened calmly. She accepted the apology, but not the return. Forgiveness doesn't always include reconciliation. Ifeoma learned that love without effort is emotional labor, that patience without change is self-betrayal, and that staying too long can be just as damaging as leaving too early. Chinedu learned that provision is not presence, that silence is not peace, and that neglect is a choice until consequences choose you. Their lives moved separately now. No drama, no bitterness, just distance shaped by growth. Ifeoma became calm, confident, whole, not hardened, not bitter, just awake. Chinedu softened. Loss humbled him, but humility cannot demand return. They met once, spoke respectfully, and parted peacefully. Love, Ifeoma learned, must protect dignity. Anything less is attachment, not love. Karma didn't destroy Chinedu. It educated him. And education is sometimes the hardest punishment. Love is powerful. But love without respect collapses. Some people learn this early, others learn it after loss, and some never learn it at all. The story ended, but the lesson remained. And somewhere, another woman was still waiting, believing love would be enough.